think about it, where does that fundamental instruction manual for, well, for you actually come from?
It's your genes, right? Your genetic code.
Exactly. And right now, there's this huge, really monumental research effort called All of Us.
Mm.
And it's basically creating this incredibly detailed map of that code, but for a massive and really diverse group of people right across the U.S.
Yeah, and for this deep dive, we're looking at some really fascinating sources you shared about this All of Us research program.
Right.
Our focus is really unpacking what these materials tell us about, the genetic ancestry and the population structure that's coming out of this huge cohort.
And it's not just academic.
No, not at all. Understanding this stuff has really significant implications for health research,
Yeah.
for personalized medicine things I know you're keen to get a solid grasp on quickly.
Absolutely. So our mission today, pretty straightforward. We're diving into the findings of a key article looking at the genetic diversity in the All of Us group.
We'll trace the ancestry patterns, figure out what it says about the U.S. population's genetic makeup.
Think of it as your shortcut to understanding a really complex, but honestly crucial area of research right now. The main source is an article in Nature Communications.
Okay, let's dive in. First off, the sheer scale.
Yeah.
It's huge.
How huge are we talking?
We're talking genomic info from nearly 300,000 people in the All of Us cohort.
Wow. Okay.
And what jumps out right away is what the analysis shows. Substantial population structure.
Meaning
Meaning you find these distinct groups of folks who are genetically quite similar, living alongside other groups who are, well, less related genetically.
So it just throws out any simple idea of the U.S. being one single, uniform genetic mix.
Completely. It's much more textured than that.
And what about the big picture, the main ancestry groups?
Yeah, the study breaks that down. European ancestry is the largest component, about 66.4%.
Okay.
Then you've got African ancestry at 19.5%, Asian at 7.6%, and American ancestry, referring to indigenous American roots, at 6.3%.
Those numbers give a good baseline, a broad picture.
They do. But what's really interesting is that it goes deeper. These genetically similar groups, they also show group-specific ancestry.
Meaning within those larger clusters.
Exactly. You start seeing these distinct patterns, not just at the continental level, like European or African, but tracing back to specific regions within those continents. It suggests a much richer, more detailed genetic tapestry.
Which makes you wonder, okay, where do people with these different ancestries tend to live? Did they find geographic patterns?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And some are quite fascinating. For instance, they saw a higher prevalence of African ancestry in the Southeast.
Which kind of aligns with historical population movements?
It does. And American ancestry, that indigenous American component, was more concentrated out in the Southwest.
Makes sense. What about European ancestry?
That was more widespread, actually. Pretty evenly distributed across the country, though maybe a bit higher concentration up north near the Canadian border.
Interesting. Any areas that stood out as particularly mixed?
Yes, places like the Northeast, Florida, and Hawaii showed what they called relatively high levels of admixture.
Admixture meaning more mixed ancestry within individuals.
Precisely.
Oh.
More diverse blend of different ancestral backgrounds and people living there. It's worth a small note, though. They suppressed results for states with very few participants, fewer than 20, who had less than 90% European ancestry.
Likely for privacy reasons?
Almost certainly, yeah, to protect individual identities.
Okay, this next part I thought was really intriguing. The connection between someone's age and their genetic diversity.
Right. They use this measure called genetic admixture entropy.
Sounds complicated.
It's basically just a way to quantify how mixed or diverse someone's ancestry is. Think of it like a score for genetic blending. High score, more mixed.
Got it. So what did they find?
The key result. Younger participants in the All of Us cohort consistently showed higher levels of this genetic admixture compared to the older participants.
So younger people tend to have more diverse genetic backgrounds.
Exactly. Which strongly suggests a trend, increasing genetic diversity in the U.S. population over time. Things are getting more mixed.
This whole discussion really brings us back to a critical issue in genetics research, doesn't it?
You mean the historical bias?
Yeah, the Eurocentric bias.
Yeah.
For decades, most genetic studies overwhelmingly focused on people of European descent.
Which is a huge problem because that's just not representative of the U.S., let alone the world.
And it's not just about representation, it has real health consequences.
Absolutely. If our understanding of how genes affect health is mostly based on one group, the discoveries might not apply to others. Or worse, they could be misleading.
Leading to bigger health disparities.
Directly contributing, yes.
Mm.
And that's really where a program like All of Us steps in.
Because a main goal was to fix that, right?
Exactly. Right from the start, a central aim was to actively recruit and include people from populations that have been historically left out of this kind of research. They're deliberately trying to close that genomics research gap.
And based on the diversity we're talking about.
It seems they're succeeding. The significant genetic and ancestral diversity they've captured confirms that All of Us is building a data set that's not just big, but genuinely diverse. It's globally important because of that.
So how did they actually figure all this out? What methods did they use to analyze almost 300,000 genomes?
They used a couple of main strategies. First, something called unsupervised clustering. Think PCA and UMP. These are computational tools.
Unsupervised meaning they didn't tell the computer what groups to look for.
Pretty much. They let the genetic data itself reveal the patterns. The algorithms grouped individuals based purely on genetic similarity without any predefined labels like race or ethnicity.
And this confirmed that substantial population structure you mentioned earlier.
Yes, these methods consistently showed those dense groups of genetically similar individuals.
Okay, what was the other main technique?
The second was supervised ancestry inference. For this, they use a program called RAI.
Supervised. So this time they did have some reference points.
Exactly. This approach compares the genetic data of the All of Us participants to existing data from established global reference populations, like comparing fingerprints.
Where do these reference populations come from?
Big international projects, mostly, like the 1,000 Genomes Project, the Human Genome Diversity Project. They use these to represent 7 broad continental-level ancestry groups: African American, East Asian, South Asian, West Asian, European, and Oceanian.
So it's like checking the All of Us participants' DNA against these known ancestral signatures.
Precisely, to estimate what proportion of each person's ancestry traces back to those different continental regions.
Would they get more specific than just continents?
They did. They were even able to identify subcontinental components. So for participants with high levels of, say, African ancestry, they can see signals relating to West Central African, West African, or Bantu groups.
Wow.
Same for East Asian signals like Han Chinese, Japanese, Southeast Asian, for South Asian, South Indian, North Indian, Central Asian, and for European, British, Italian, Iberian, and so on.
That's incredibly granular. But the article makes a point that these estimates aren't perfect, right? They depend on the references.
That's a really crucial point. The accuracy hangs entirely on those reference samples. If a particular group isn't well represented in the reference data sets, the estimates for people with ancestry from that group might be off.
Did they test for that?
They did. They ran sensitivity analyses, basically, tweaking the reference populations, adding some, removing others to see how the estimates changed.
And what did that show?
It suggested, for example, that some minor Asian and African components seen in some participants might be slightly misassigned because the current reference panels maybe aren't complete enough yet for every group.
So it's important to remember these results show genetic similarity to the specific references they used.
Exactly. It's not an absolute declaration of ancestry, but a measure of similarity to the chosen benchmarks. However, the fact that the unsupervised methods, the ones just looking at the raw data, also found that strong population structure gives you more confidence in the overall picture.
Okay, let's connect this back to health. Why is getting this detailed picture of genetic diversity so important for health equity?
This is really the core of it. Understanding this diversity is, as the article puts it, a crucial prerequisite for making sure precision medicine actually works for everyone.
Because if we only study genes in one group,
we risk developing treatments or prevention strategies that don't work or work differently for people from other backgrounds. We could actually widen health gaps instead of closing them.
So having this incredibly diverse genetic data and linking it with all the other health information, All of Us collects lifestyle, environment, medical records.
Exactly. That's the power. It lets researchers start untangling the really complex interplay between genes, environment, social factors, and how they all contribute to health outcomes and disparities across all these different groups.
Yeah.
It allows for a much more nuanced view.
And thinking back to that trend, the increasing genetic diversity in younger people, the article had a really provocative thought about what that means for the future.
Yeah, it's quite profound, actually. Based on this observable increase in admixture, the authors basically suggest that our traditional genetic ancestry categories and group designations will become increasingly obsolete over time.
Meaning the lines will blur so much.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
As populations continue to mix genetically, the biological basis for these distinct categories might just become less and less clear, less meaningful.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. The key takeaways for you listening. First, the sheer scale of genetic diversity in the U.S. population identified by all of us. It's not one smooth blend.
No, definitely not. There are distinct genetic clusters, each with its own unique ancestry patterns.
Second, ancestry isn't spread evenly geographically. We saw those regional concentrations, African ancestry in the southeast, American in the southwest, and so on.
Right. And third, maybe the most striking point, is that younger generations are showing higher levels of genetic mixing, suggesting diversity is actually increasing.
All of this comes from this massive effort to build a detailed genetic picture for a huge, diverse group of Americans.
And for me, the real aha moment is that finding about younger generations having higher admixture. It really makes you think about how we define populations and ancestry and how that might change.
Absolutely. And the relevance here is clear. This kind of research is foundational. It's paving the way for precision medicine that's genuinely more equitable, more effective for everyone. That's the goal you want research to achieve.
Which leaves you with a really interesting question to think about. As this genetic mixing continues, how might our whole societal understanding of race, ethnicity, even how we see our own individual identity, how might all that shift in the future?
It's a big question, thinking about how biology and society interact. The societal implications are fascinating.
Definitely something to ponder.
And if you're curious and want to learn more about the program itself, you can always check out the All of Us Research Program website. They have lots of information about their goals and the research they're enabling.